The Crawlers, the unseen predators of Park Avenue. Chapter 1. The affluent life. The sun was setting over New York City, casting a golden hue over the skyline. The Upper East Side, with its tree-lined streets and historic brownstones, was a picture of opulence. At the heart of this affluence stood 720 Park Avenue, a towering structure of elegance and grandeur. Its ornate facade, with intricate stone carvings and wrought iron balconies, spoke of a time when craftsmanship was an art. Inside, the building was a hive of activity. The marble-floored lobby echoed with the soft murmurs of residents returning from their day, the clinking of wine glasses from the penthouse suite, and the distant hum of a piano. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their light reflecting off the gold-trimmed mirrors that adorned the walls. Mrs. Eleanor Vander Woods, a resident of the 12th floor, adjusted her pearl necklace as she stepped out of the elevator. "Good evening, James," she greeted the doorman with a nod. "Good evening, Mrs. Vander Woods," James replied, holding the door open for her. As Eleanor walked to her apartment, she couldn't help but overhear hushed conversations among her neighbors. "Did you hear that noise last night?" one woman whispered to another. "It sounded like it came from the basement." "I've heard it too," the other replied, her eyes wide with fear. "It's not the first time. There are rumors, you know." Eleanor quickened her pace. She had heard the rumors too. Whispers of strange occurrences in the building, of eerie noises in the dead of night, of shadowy figures seen in the basement. But she dismissed them as mere tales, the product of overactive imaginations. In a corner apartment on the 10th floor, Alex Turner sat at his desk, surrounded by stacks of newspapers and journals. A journalist by profession, Alex had moved to 720 Park Avenue a month ago, drawn not by its luxury but by the rumors that surrounded it. There was a story here, he was sure of it, and he was determined to uncover it. His phone buzzed, breaking his train of thought. It was a text from his editor. "Any updates on the Park Avenue story?" It read. Alex sighed. He had been chasing leads for weeks, but every time he felt he was getting close, the trail would go cold. He needed a breakthrough, and he needed it soon. He decided to take a break and headed to the building's rooftop garden. As he stepped out, the cool evening breeze hit his face. The city stretched out below him, its lights twinkling like stars. But Alex's gaze was drawn to the building across the alley. An old, abandoned factory, its windows broken, its walls covered in graffiti. It stood in stark contrast to the luxury of 720 Park Avenue. As he looked at the factory, a movement caught his eye. A shadowy figure, barely visible in the dim light, was moving on one of the upper floors. Alex squinted, trying to get a better look, but the figure disappeared. A chill ran down his spine. The rumors, the noises, the shadowy figures, could they all be connected? And what was the link between 720 Park Avenue and the abandoned factory? Determined to find answers, Alex headed back to his apartment. He had a long night of research ahead of him. Little did he know that he was about to uncover a secret that would change his life forever. As the clock struck midnight, the lights of 720 Park Avenue dimmed, and the building was plunged into darkness. But in the silence of the night, if one listened closely, they could hear the soft, eerie whispers of the past, hinting at the terror that lay ahead. Chapter 2. The abandoned factory. The morning sun cast long shadows on the streets of the Upper East Side. Alex, with a cup of steaming coffee in hand, stared intently at the abandoned factory from his apartment window. Its dilapidated structure, juxtaposed against the grandeur of 720 Park Avenue, seemed to hold secrets that whispered in the wind. He had spent the night digging through old newspaper archives, trying to piece together the history of the factory. Built in the early 1900s, it was once the crown jewel of New York's industrial age, producing textiles that were shipped worldwide. But by the 1970s, as industries moved overseas, the factory fell into disrepair and was eventually abandoned. One article, dated from the late 80s, caught Alex's attention. It spoke of workers who had mysteriously disappeared from the factory in its heyday. Their disappearances were never explained, and over time, they became mere footnotes in the factory's storied history. But the article hinted at something more sinister. It spoke of shadowy figures seen in the factory late at night and of strange noises that echoed through its halls. Alex's mind raced. Could these shadowy figures be the same ones he had seen last night? And were they connected to the rumors of the crawlers? He decided to visit the local library to dig deeper. As he walked through the quiet aisles, the librarian, Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman with silver hair and glasses that magnified her keen eyes, approached him. "Looking for something, young man?" she asks. "I'm researching the old factory across from 720 Park Avenue," Alex replied. Mrs. Henderson's face turned pale. "You should stay away from that place," she whispered, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "It's cursed." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Cursed?" She leaned in closer. "People have gone in and never come out. They say it's haunted by the crawlers." "The crawlers?" Alex echoed, his interest piqued. Mrs. Henderson shushed him. "Not so loud. They were once workers at the factory. But after a terrible accident, they were trapped inside. Over time, they changed, became something else. They now lurk in the shadows, preying on anyone who dares to enter." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. The pieces were starting to fit together. The rumors, the shadowy figures, the disappearances, they were all connected to the crawlers. He thanked Mrs. Henderson and headed back to his apartment, his mind racing. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the city. As darkness enveloped the streets, Alex made a decision. He would explore the factory that night. Armed with a flashlight and a camera, he made his way to the factory's entrance. The rusty gates creaked as he pushed them open. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The factory was a maze of corridors and rooms, each one darker and more foreboding than the last. As he ventured deeper, he could feel the weight of the building's history pressing down on him. Every shadow seemed to move, every noise echoed with menace. Suddenly, a soft whisper reached his ears. He turned, shining his flashlight down a corridor. At the far end, he saw a figure, its elongated limbs casting eerie shadows on the walls. It was one of the crawlers. Alex's heart raced. He snapped a photo and retreated, but as he turned a corner, he came face to face with another crawler. Its eyes, black voids, stared into his soul. Alex felt an overwhelming sense of dread. He ran, his footsteps echoing through the factory. The crawlers were everywhere, their whispers growing louder, their shadows closing in. Alex felt like he was trapped in a nightmare. Finally, he reached the exit and burst out into the night. Gasping for breath, he looked back at the factory. It stood silent and menacing, its secrets hidden in the shadows. Alex knew he had uncovered something terrifying. But he also knew that he couldn't let it go. The crawlers were real, and they were hunting. The residents of 720 Park Avenue were in danger, and it was up to him to stop the nightmare. As he made his way back to his apartment, the weight of his discovery pressing down on him, Alex felt a growing sense of unease. The night was far from over, and the shadows held more secrets than he could ever imagine. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Dark. The opulence of 720 Park Avenue was a stark contrast to the world outside. Residents, cocooned in their luxurious apartments, were often oblivious to the city's underbelly. But as days turned into nights, even the thick walls and soundproofed rooms couldn't keep out the unsettling whispers that seemed to emanate from the building's very foundations. It began subtly. Mrs. Clara Thompson, residing on the third floor, was the first to notice. One evening, as she was engrossed in her book, she heard a faint scratching sound coming from below. Thinking it was just the building's old plumbing, she dismissed it. But as the nights went on, the noises grew louder and more frequent. Whispers, soft and unintelligible, seemed to drift up from the basement, making her question her sanity. Word spread, and soon other residents began to share their experiences. Mr. Jeffrey Hartman, a retired banker living on the 7th floor, spoke of seeing shadowy figures darting in the alleyway when he looked out of his window late at night. They were always just out of focus, disappearing the moment he tried to get a clearer look. The building's community was tight-knit, and gatherings in the opulent lobby were frequent. Over glasses of wine and canapes, the residents exchanged stories, each more chilling than the last. The once dismissed rumors now became topics of hushed discussions. Then, the unimaginable happened. Miss Lydia Greenfield, a young pianist known for her evening soirees, went missing. She had last been seen by her maid, heading down to the basement storage to retrieve an old music sheet. Hours turned into days, and there was no sign of her. The police were called, and the building was searched from top to bottom, but Lydia had vanished without a trace. The atmosphere in 720 Park Avenue grew tense. Parents held their children a little closer, and residents double-locked their doors. Whispers turned into speculations. Could the shadowy figures in the alley be responsible? Were the eerie noises from the basement connected to Lydia's disappearance? Alex, having had his own chilling encounter, felt a growing sense of responsibility. The journalist in him saw a story, but the human in him saw people in fear. He decided to investigate. Late one evening, armed with a flashlight and a recorder, Alex made his way to the basement. The elevator descended slowly, its hum echoing in the silence. As the doors slid open, a cold draft greeted him. The basement, with its dim lighting and long corridors, felt like a different world. He began by exploring the storage rooms. Old furniture, paintings, and trunks filled the spaces. But it was in Lydia's storage unit that he found the first clue. On the floor, next to an overturned stool, lay a music sheet. But it wasn't the sheet that caught his attention, it was the markings on it. Symbols, unfamiliar and eerie, were drawn in what looked like red ink. Following the symbols, Alex ventured deeper into the basement. The whispers grew louder, guiding him. They led him to a sealed-off section, old and forgotten. The door, heavy and rusted, had a small window. Peering through, Alex's blood ran cold. Inside, the walls were covered in the same symbols as the music sheet. And in the center of the room stood a stone altar, stained dark. Suddenly, a noise behind him made Alex turn. A shadowy figure stood at the end of the corridor, its elongated limbs almost touching the ground. It moved towards him, its movements silent and fluid. Alex, heart pounding, backed away. But as he turned to run, more figures emerged from the shadows, blocking his path. He was trapped. The figures closed in, their whispers now deafening. But just as all hope seemed lost, a bright light flooded the corridor. The figures recoiled, shielding their eyes. Taking advantage of the distraction, Alex made a run for it. He didn't stop until he reached his apartment, slamming the door behind him. Breathing heavily, he tried to process what he had just witnessed. The basement, the symbols, the altar, and the shadowy figures, they were all connected. And at the heart of it all was the mystery of Lydia's disappearance. As dawn broke, Alex made a decision. He would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The residents of 720 Park Avenue deserved answers. And he was determined to give them. But as he looked out of his window, the abandoned factory looming in the distance, he couldn't shake off the feeling that he was being watched. The game of cat and mouse had just begun, and Alex was right in the middle of it. Chapter 4. Descent into darkness. The abandoned factory stood like a silent sentinel, its darkened windows and crumbling walls a testament to a time long forgotten. Its proximity to the grandeur of 720 Park Avenue was a stark reminder of the city's ever-changing landscape. But for Alex, it was the epicenter of the mystery that had consumed his life. Determined to uncover the truth, he decided to explore the factory. The evening sky was painted with hues of orange and purple as he approached the imposing structure. The main entrance was boarded up, but a side door, hidden from view, was slightly ajar. Taking a deep breath, Alex stepped inside. The factory was a labyrinth of corridors and rooms, each more foreboding than the last. The remnants of its industrial past lay scattered around, rusted machinery, broken conveyor belts, and discarded tools. But it was the silence, oppressive and all-consuming, that unnerved Alex the most. Guided by the beam of his flashlight, he made his way to a staircase that led to the sub-basements. The air grew colder as he descended, and the weight of the building pressed down on him. Each step echoed in the vast emptiness, amplifying his sense of isolation. The sub-basements were unlike anything Alex had ever seen. The walls were lined with strange symbols, similar to the ones he had seen in the basement of 720 Park Avenue. But here, they were more intricate, more menacing. They seemed to pulse with a life of their own, drawing him deeper into the bowels of the factory. As he ventured further, Alex stumbled upon a vast cavern. The ceiling was lost in darkness, and the walls were lined with alcoves. And in each alcove stood a figure, motionless and silent. The crawlers. Their pale, elongated forms were illuminated by a faint, otherworldly glow. Their large, black eyes, devoid of emotion, stared into the abyss. It was a sight that would haunt Alex's dreams for years to come. Suddenly, a soft whisper reached his ears. Turning, he came face to face with a crawler. Its eyes, devoid of pupils, bore into his soul. Its long fingers, ending in razor-sharp claws, reached out for him. Frozen in fear, Alex could only watch as the crawler moved closer. Its whispers grew louder, filling his mind with images of darkness and despair. But just as it was about to strike, a loud noise echoed through the cavern. The crawler recoiled, its attention diverted. Seizing the opportunity, Alex ran. The cavern was a maze, and every turn seemed to lead him deeper into the heart of darkness. But he didn't stop, driven by pure adrenaline and the will to survive. Behind him, the crawlers gave chase. Their whispers grew louder, their movements more frantic. The walls of the cavern seemed to close in on Alex, and he could feel the weight of the crawler's presence pressing down on him. But just when all hope seemed lost, Alex saw a faint light in the distance. Pushing himself to the limit, he sprinted towards it. The light grew brighter, and soon, he found himself at the base of a staircase. Without a second thought, he climbed, the crawler's whispers fading with each step. Emerging into the open air, Alex took a moment to catch his breath. The night sky was a blanket of stars, and the city lights twinkled in the distance. But the sense of relief was short-lived. The factory, with its dark secrets, loomed behind him, a constant reminder of the terror that lay within. As he made his way back to 720 Park Avenue, Alex knew that his investigation was far from over. The crawlers were real, and they were hunting. The residents of the building were in danger, and it was up to him to stop the nightmare. But as he looked back at the factory one last time, he couldn't shake off the feeling that he was being watched. The game of cat and mouse had taken a sinister turn, and Alex was right in the middle of it. Chapter 5. The hunt begins. The opulence of 720 Park Avenue was now marred by an undercurrent of fear. The once lively corridors were silent, and the grand lobby, which used to buzz with activity, was eerily quiet. The residents, once proud of their address, now whispered in hushed tones about the terror that lurked in the shadows. It started with the crawlers becoming bolder. No longer confined to the cover of night, they began to venture out during the day, their pale forms contrasting starkly against the city's backdrop. Their presence was felt everywhere, from the basement to the penthouse, from the parking garage to the rooftop garden. Then, the disappearances began. First, it was Mr. Rodriguez, the elderly gentleman from the 5th floor. Then, the Anderson family, who lived on the 9th. One by one, residents began to vanish without a trace. Panic set in, and the building's management, in a desperate bid to ensure the safety of its inhabitants, declared a lockdown. Alex, having witnessed the horrors of the factory, knew that time was of the essence. He couldn't stand by and watch as the crawlers claimed more victims. He needed to act, and he needed to act fast. Gathering a group of residents, he formed a team. There was Robert, a former military officer with a keen strategic mind. Maya, a tech-savvy teenager who knew the building inside out. And Eleanor, the elderly resident from the 12th floor, whose knowledge of the building's history was unparalleled. Together, they began to formulate a plan. Using the building's blueprints, they identified potential entry points for the crawlers and set up surveillance cameras. They also set up traps, hoping to capture one of the creatures and study it. As night fell, the team took their positions. Alex and Robert patrolled the corridors, while Maya monitored the cameras from the safety of her apartment. Eleanor, with her vast knowledge of the building's secrets, acted as their guide. Hours passed, and there was no sign of the crawlers. The building was silent, save for the occasional creak or groan. But just as the team was beginning to lose hope, Maya's voice crackled over the walkie-talkie. "They're here," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. The surveillance footage showed multiple crawlers emerging from the basement, their elongated forms moving with a predatory grace. They split up, each one heading in a different direction. Alex and Robert, armed with makeshift weapons, moved to intercept them. The corridors were dark, the only light coming from their flashlights. Every shadow seemed to move, every noise echoed with menace. Suddenly, a crawler appeared, its pale form illuminated by the flashlight's beam. It lunged at Alex, its claws outstretched. But Robert, with his military training, was quick to react. He tackled the creature, pinning it to the ground. But more crawlers appeared, their whispers filling the air. The situation was dire. The team was outnumbered, and the crawlers were closing in. But just when all hope seemed lost, Eleanor, using her knowledge of the building's secrets, activated an old fire alarm system. The deafening sound echoed through the corridors, disorienting the crawlers and giving the team a chance to regroup. Using the chaos to their advantage, they managed to capture one of the creatures, confining it to a reinforced storage room. The rest of the crawlers, unable to bear the noise, retreated to the safety of the factory. As dawn broke, the team, exhausted but alive, gathered in Maya's apartment. The captured crawler, its movements restricted, stared at them with its emotionless eyes. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. But Alex knew that the battle was far from over. The crawlers were still out there, and they would return. The residents of 720 Park Avenue were still in danger, and it was up to him and his team to protect them. As the city woke up to a new day, the building stood tall, a beacon of hope in the face of adversity. But the shadows held more secrets than anyone could ever imagine, and the hunt had only just begun. Chapter 6. Secrets unveiled. The captured crawler, confined within the reinforced storage room, became the focal point of the team's investigation. Its presence was both a source of dread and intrigue. The creature, with its pale, elongated form and void-like eyes, was a grotesque reminder of the terror that lurked in the shadows. Alex, driven by a need to understand the enemy, spent hours observing the creature. Its movements were minimal, but its eyes, always watching, always aware, hinted at a deeper intelligence. It was during one of these observation sessions that Alex noticed something peculiar. The crawler, when exposed to certain stimuli, like old factory sounds or specific symbols, exhibited signs of distress. Determined to delve deeper, Alex, with the help of Eleanor, began researching the history of the factory. They unearthed old documents, blueprints, and journals that painted a chilling picture. The factory, in its heyday, was not just a hub of industrial activity. Beneath its facade of textile production, it housed a secret research facility. Funded by shadowy organizations and overseen by a group of rogue scientists, the facility conducted experiments that pushed the boundaries of ethics and morality. The aim was to create superhuman soldiers, beings capable of immense strength and resilience. To achieve this, the scientists experimented on factory workers, subjecting them to a cocktail of chemicals and radiation. The results were disastrous. The workers, instead of gaining superhuman abilities, underwent a horrific transformation. Their bodies elongated, their skin turned pale, and their minds, once human, were now driven by primal instincts. They became the crawlers. As Alex and Eleanor delved deeper into the factory's dark past, they made another shocking discovery. The lead scientist behind the experiments was none other than Dr. Nathaniel Turner, Alex's great-grandfather. The realization hit Alex like a ton of bricks. The legacy of terror that now plagued 720 Park Avenue was, in part, a result of his own family's actions. The weight of the revelation was immense. Alex grappled with feelings of guilt and anger. But amidst the turmoil, a determination grew. He had a personal stake in this battle, and he was going to see it through to the end. Eleanor, sensing Alex's distress, offered words of comfort. "The sins of our ancestors are not ours to bear," she said. "But it is our duty to right their wrongs." Together, they shared their findings with the rest of the team. The knowledge of the crawlers' origins, while disturbing, provided valuable insights into their behavior. They were driven by pain, by memories of a life once lived. And while their actions were monstrous, at their core, they were victims of a cruel experiment gone awry. The team, now armed with this knowledge, began formulating a plan. The crawlers, once human, could perhaps be communicated with, reasoned with. And if not, They needed to find a way to contain them, to prevent further harm. As night fell, the building was once again plunged into darkness. But this time, there was a glimmer of hope. The residents of 720 Park Avenue, united in their resolve, were ready to face the terror head-on. And as the city slept, unaware of the battle that was about to unfold, Alex stood at the forefront, determined to confront the demons of his family's past and protect the future of 720 Park Avenue. The stage was set, and the battle for survival had only just begun. Chapter 7. The first confrontation. The underground parking of 720 Park Avenue was a vast expanse of concrete and shadows, a maze of parked cars and dimly lit corners. It was here that the team decided to make their stand. The crawlers, drawn to the building's depths, had made the parking their hunting ground, and it was here that the team planned to trap them. Using the knowledge they had gathered, the team set up a series of traps. Bright lights, which seemed to repel the crawlers, were positioned at strategic points. A sound system, playing a loop of factory noises, was set up to disorient them. And at the center of it all was a cage, reinforced and electrified, designed to hold the creatures. As night fell, the team took their positions. Alex and Robert, armed and ready, patrolled the perimeter. Maya, from her vantage point in the security room, monitored the cameras, while Eleanor, with her vast knowledge, acted as their guide. Hours passed, and the tension was palpable. Every sound, every movement, was magnified in the silence. But just as doubt began to creep in, Maya's voice crackled over the walkie-talkie. "They're coming," she whispered. The surveillance footage showed a group of crawlers entering the parking. Drawn by the factory noises, they moved cautiously, their elongated forms casting eerie shadows on the walls. As they ventured deeper, the traps were activated. Bright lights flooded the area, disorienting the crawlers. The factory noises, echoing through the parking, added to their confusion. And as they stumbled and recoiled, Alex and Robert moved in, herding them towards the cage. But just as victory seemed within reach, the unexpected happened. One of the team members, driven by fear and desperation, betrayed them. Robert, the former military officer, turned off the lights and sound system, plunging the parking into darkness. "Why?" Alex shouted, the sense of betrayal cutting deep. Robert, his face a mask of terror, replied, "They promised to spare me if I helped them." "I'm sorry." The crawlers, seizing the opportunity, attacked. Their movements, swift and coordinated, hinted at a surprising intelligence. They were not just mindless creatures, they were strategic and cunning. The team, caught off guard, was scattered. Alex, separated from the others, found himself cornered. A crawler, its black eyes staring into his soul, moved closer. But just as it was about to strike, a bright light blinded it. Maya, using her tech skills, had managed to override the system, turning the lights back on. The crawlers, repelled by the brightness, retreated. But the damage was done. The team, once united, was now fractured. Robert, consumed by guilt, was inconsolable. As dawn broke, the team regrouped. The night's events had taken a toll, both physically and emotionally. The betrayal, the unexpected intelligence of the crawlers, and the realization that they were up against a formidable enemy weighed heavily on them. But amidst the despair, a determination grew. The residents of 720 Park Avenue were still in danger, and the team, despite the odds, was determined to protect them. As the city woke up to a new day, the battle lines were drawn. The crawlers, with their surprising intelligence, were a force to be reckoned with. But the team, united in their resolve, was ready for the challenge. And as the sun cast its golden glow on the city, the stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of 720 Park Avenue and its residents. The battle for survival had entered a new phase, and the stakes had never been higher. Chapter 8. Darkness engulfs the evening sky over New York City was painted with deep shades of crimson and indigo, but the beauty outside was in stark contrast to the palpable tension within 720 Park Avenue. The grandeur of the building, which once stood as a symbol of luxury and opulence, was now overshadowed by an impending sense of doom. The crawlers, emboldened by their recent successes, had found a way to infiltrate the building. Their presence was felt everywhere, from the penthouse suites to the laundry rooms. The once lively corridors were now silent, save for the soft, eerie whispers that seemed to emanate from the walls. As night fell, the horror began. Residents, unaware of the danger lurking in the shadows, went about their evening routines. But one by one, they were hunted down. The crawlers, with their predatory grace, moved silently, their pale forms blending seamlessly with the darkness. Screams echoed through the building, each one more chilling than the last. Panic set in, and chaos ensued. Residents ran for their lives, but the crawlers, with their surprising intelligence, were always one step ahead. Alex, having witnessed the horrors of the factory, knew that time was of the essence. Armed with a makeshift weapon, he moved through the building, trying to save as many residents as he could. But the crawlers were relentless, and with each passing moment, the odds seemed insurmountable. It was during one of these rescue attempts that tragedy struck. Alex's sister, Emily, who had come to visit him, was cornered by a group of crawlers. Despite his best efforts, Alex couldn't save her. The loss was devastating, and the weight of it threatened to crush him. But amidst the despair, a fire ignited within him. The crawlers had taken everything from him: his home, his sense of security, and now his sister. He was done running, done hiding. It was time to end the nightmare. Gathering a group of survivors, Alex formulated a plan. Using the building's blueprints, they identified key points that could be used to trap the crawlers. They also gathered weapons, anything that could be used to defend themselves. As the night wore on, the battle raged. The crawlers, driven by their primal instincts, attacked with ferocity. But the residents, united in their resolve, fought back with equal vigor. The building became a battleground, and with each passing hour, the stakes grew higher. But as dawn broke, the tide began to turn. The crawlers, weakened by the sustained assault, began to retreat. The residents, seeing an opportunity, pressed their advantage. And one by one, the crawlers were driven out. The battle was won, but the cost was immense. The building, once a beacon of luxury, was now a shell of its former self. The residents, traumatized by the night's events, were forever changed. But amidst the ruins, a sense of hope emerged. The residents of 720 Park Avenue, once divided by their differences, were now united in their resolve. They had faced the unimaginable and had come out stronger. As the city woke up to a new day, the building stood tall, a symbol of resilience and determination. The crawlers were gone, but their legacy would live on. And as the residents began the long process of rebuilding, they did so with the knowledge that they were not alone. For Alex, the battle was personal. The loss of his sister was a wound that would never heal. But he took solace in the knowledge that he had played a part in ending the nightmare. And as he looked out over the city, he made a silent vow to never forget, to always be vigilant, and to ensure that the horrors of the past would never be repeated. Chapter 9. The final stand, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the city. The abandoned factory, with its broken windows and graffiti-covered walls, stood in stark contrast to the bustling metropolis around it. But for Alex and the survivors of 720 Park Avenue, it was ground zero. The heart of the nightmare. And it was here that they would make their final stand. The days following the harrowing night at the apartment building were a blur of activity. The survivors, united in their resolve, began preparing for the final confrontation. The factory, with its labyrinthine corridors and vast underground chambers, was the perfect battleground. And it was here that they would trap the crawlers and end the terror once and for all. Using the knowledge they had gathered, the team set up a series of traps. The factory's old machinery was repurposed, turning it into a deadly obstacle course. Tripwires, rigged with explosives, were placed at strategic points. And at the heart of it all was a cage, similar to the one in the parking garage, designed to hold the crawlers. As night fell, the team took their positions. The factory was eerily silent, the only sound being the soft hum of the machinery. The tension was palpable, each passing moment amplifying the sense of impending doom. Suddenly, a soft whisper echoed through the factory. The crawlers were here. Drawn by the scent of their prey, they moved cautiously, their pale forms casting eerie shadows on the walls. But as they ventured deeper, the traps were activated. Bright lights flooded the area, disorienting the crawlers. The sound of the machinery, amplified by the factory's acoustics, added to their confusion. But the crawlers, with their surprising intelligence, quickly adapted. They avoided the tripwires, moving with a predatory grace. And as they closed in on the team, the battle began. The factory became a battleground, with each side using their strengths to their advantage. The crawlers, with their agility and numbers, attacked from all sides. But the team, armed and prepared, fought back with equal vigor. The battle raged on, each side inflicting heavy casualties on the other. But as the night wore on, the tide began to turn. The crawlers, weakened by the sustained assault, began to retreat. And the team, seeing an opportunity, pressed their advantage. But just as victory seemed within reach, disaster struck. One of the tripwires, damaged during the battle, malfunctioned, triggering a massive explosion. The factory was engulfed in flames, the fire spreading rapidly. The team, caught off guard, scrambled to escape. The flames, fueled by the factory's old machinery, grew higher and higher, turning the building into a blazing inferno. The heat was intense, the smoke suffocating. But amidst the chaos, a sense of determination emerged. The team, united in their resolve, fought their way through the flames, using their knowledge of the factory's layout to their advantage. And as they emerged into the open air, they were greeted by a sight that would stay with them forever. The factory, once a symbol of the city's industrial past, was now a raging inferno, its flames lighting up the night sky. The crawlers, unable to escape the blaze, perished in the flames. Their screams, a haunting reminder of the terror they had inflicted, echoed through the night. As dawn broke, the team, exhausted but alive, gathered to survey the damage. The factory, once a hub of activity, was now a smoldering ruin. But amidst the destruction, a sense of hope emerged. The nightmare was over. The crawlers were gone. And the survivors of 720 Park Avenue, having faced the unimaginable, had come out stronger. As the city woke up to a new day, the team, united in their resolve, began the long process of rebuilding. The horrors of the past would never be forgotten, but the future held promise. And as they looked out over the city, they did so with the knowledge that they had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. Chapter 10. Dawn of a new day. The first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, casting a golden hue over the city. The remnants of the factory, still smoldering from the previous night's inferno, stood as a testament to the battle that had raged within its walls. The once imposing structure was now reduced to rubble. Its charred remains a stark contrast to the bustling metropolis that surrounded it. For the residents of 720 Park Avenue, the dawn brought with it a mixture of relief and sorrow. The crawlers, the very embodiment of their nightmares, had been vanquished. But the cost had been immense. Friends and neighbors had been lost, and the scars of the battle, both physical and emotional, would take time to heal. Alex, standing amidst the ruins, was lost in thought. The events of the past few days had taken a toll on him. The loss of his sister, the revelation of his family's dark past, and the weight of the responsibility he felt towards the residents of 720 Park Avenue weighed heavily on his shoulders. But amidst the turmoil, a determination grew. The world needed to know the truth. The experiments, the creation of the crawlers, and the subsequent cover-up had to be exposed. And Alex, with his journalistic background, was the perfect person to do it. Gathering evidence, he began to piece together the story. The factory's blueprints, the old documents and journals, and the testimonies of the survivors painted a chilling picture. And as he delved deeper, the scale of the conspiracy became apparent. Powerful organizations, shadowy figures, and rogue scientists had all played a part in the creation of the crawlers. But as he prepared to go public with his findings, a shocking revelation came to light. A crawler, somehow having survived the inferno, had been captured. Its presence, a chilling reminder of the terror that had been unleashed upon the city, sent shockwaves through the community. The crawler, confined to a secure facility, became the focal point of intense scrutiny. Scientists, eager to study the creature, flocked to the facility. And as they began their research, a chilling discovery was made. The crawler, despite its monstrous appearance, exhibited signs of human consciousness. It responded to stimuli, showed signs of distress, and, most chillingly, seemed to recognize certain individuals. For Alex, the discovery was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it provided irrefutable evidence of the experiments and the subsequent transformation of the factory workers into the crawlers. On the other, it raised ethical and moral dilemmas. The crawler, once human, was now a victim, trapped in a monstrous form. The world watched with bated breath as the story unfolded. The revelations sent shockwaves through society, leading to widespread outrage and demands for justice. The organizations involved were exposed, their reputations tarnished, and their leaders brought to justice. But for Alex, the battle was far from over. The crawler, with its human consciousness, deserved a chance at redemption. And with the help of leading scientists, he began the arduous task of finding a cure. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, progress was made. The crawler, responding to treatment, began to show signs of improvement. And as its monstrous form began to recede, a human form emerged. The transformation was hailed as a medical miracle, and the crawler, now fully human, was reintroduced to society. The world watched with bated breath as he took his first steps into the world, a symbol of hope and redemption. For Alex, the journey had come full circle. The horrors of the past had been confronted, and the future held promise. And as he looked out over the city, he did so with the knowledge that he had played a part in righting the wrongs of the past. The sun, now high in the sky, cast its golden glow over the city. And as the residents of 720 Park Avenue went about their day, they did so with the knowledge that they had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. The dawn of a new day had arrived, and with it, the promise of a brighter future. We hope you have enjoyed our storytelling offering tonight. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to be alerted of future weekly additions to our collections. Paranormal Untold Stories.